And that was how to make the elixir of life and holy grail. Next up,
I'm a mortal, your source for all things immortal.
Hello, my name is Dennis Kowalski. I'm the president of the Cryonics Institute. And thanks for having me on your podcast, guys.
Yeah, we love having you here. For all of you guys listening, welcome to I'm Immortal. Today we have Dennis Kowalski as he introduced himself. And Dennis, let's start off with a simple question. Since our podcast is about immortality, life extension, and just aging in general, what does the word immortal or immortality mean to you?
Well, uh, words are important, but, with the strictest definition, immortal means you live forever. That's not really what we're trying to do in cryonics and a lot of the life extension movement. What we're trying to do is extend life radically. So, something statistically will get you sooner or later. So I don't think any of us is really talking about true immortality. We're just talking about the same thing that regular medicine and diet and health and exercise and everything proposes to do. Extend our lives, not just our biological life, but our healthy life, so that we can spend time with our loved ones and our family and enjoy.
yeah, we can all enjoy more parks outside and nice weather, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess because we've never met someone in cryonics, it's not too often you do. So I guess to start off with, how did you first get involved in cryonics at all?
When I was a younger kid, I read a lot of science and science fiction as well. And I noticed it was a recurring theme, and even in history, you go back to the Egyptians and the pyramids, and the people have always been seeking longevity. And you've always heard, through different science fiction films about space travel, where they suspend a person's life status temporarily to get from a long distance from one area to another. And it was in the 1960s that Professor Robert Ettinger from Michigan, actually, he was a physics professor, and he decided to look into it and apply science to the theory that could we do this? He applied science to the idea, and he wanted to see, is this possible? So he wrote a book called The Prospect of Immortality. And in the book, it became a #1 worldwide bestseller. And it was, he was on all the talk circuits. And I remember seeing him as a young kid, and I thought, boy, this is really interesting. It's fascinating. But, how are they going to ever bring anyone back? Are they just purely relying on the future? So I thought it's a good idea, but I kind of stowed it away in the background of my mind. And later on, when I was a little older, 18, 19 years old, I read a book called Engines of Creation by Eric Drexler. And in chapter 9 of that book, it basically, it's about molecular nanotechnology. And it's basically the reverse engineering of life at the molecular level, the mechanical reverse engineering of what happens with biology. And the book really laid out a fantastic blueprint and concept of how we probably would be able to revive patients. It's not at all easy, and it'll probably take another 100 years or more for us to figure it out, but it is in no way impossible. In fact, the book kind of shows a lot of biological and natural processes that, in one shape or form or another, reverse biological aging. When you think about it, when two people meet and have a child, some of their cells in their body are reverting back into germline cells, and resetting the clock biologically. And there's all sorts of examples of this in nature. So it's just a matter of figuring out what Mother Nature does and reverse engineering it.
Great. Yeah, I love those examples. Yeah, there's a lot of examples of even a lot of species like the water bear who, preserve themselves for a long time
Right.
in stasis. So for the audience out there, could you describe what exactly is cryonics and how does cryonics work?
So the cryonics is a process in which people, after they're pronounced legally dead, and I emphasize legally dead. That doesn't mean you're technically dead in the strictest sense. But once people are legally dead, they're in cardiac arrest, and all traditional conventional medical science is given up currently because our current technology can't bring you back. Well, that at that point, in an ideal situation, we get to that person, patient, we call them, as soon as possible. We'd put their body into a ice water bath. We'd continue CPR to circulate the blood and nutrients to the brain, but also to take and what am I thinking of? Take the warm core blood, and exchange it with the colder peripheral blood that's touching the ice bath, so that we can cool the person as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. The ideal is when you cool a person down, the chemical reactions that are going on, including degradation of a body, is slowed down. And then we know this intuitively. If you have food outside on a warm day, it's going to last much longer in a refrigerator, and then that much longer in a freezer or dry ice. So it's actually a function of the Remus equation, which is a exponential, that the reaction time of the molecules is slowed down exponentially the colder you get. So you're buying yourself time. So we know that, in emergency medicine, when you go into cardiac arrest, you need someone to do CPR as soon as possible. And the longer you wait, the worse your chances are going to be of bringing a person back. And this is with conventional medicine. With cryonics, we eventually get the person into liquid dry ice, or not dry ice, liquid nitrogen, and seconds of time actually become thousands of years. So the thought is that modern medicine, we're not at the zenith of our knowledge today, certainly, but modern medicine in the future will be able to do things we couldn't have even dreamed of doing in the present. And if you look around, there's a lot of things we can do today that we couldn't do 40, 50 years ago. Heart transplants, even the routine cardiac defibrillation and CPR wasn't available 50, 60 years ago. So we're already, in a way, raising the dead by using CPR and defibrillation. But anyways, I kind of got a little sidetracked there. In an ideal situation, we'd put a person in an ice bath. We'd ship them to the Cryonics Institute in Michigan, Clinton Township, Michigan. There at our facility, we do a blood washout.
Yeah.
We would blood likes to move, so if it stays still, it'll clot. So we use anticoagulants and some other medications. We circulate them with CPR, and then we hook the patient up to the equivalent of a heart-lung bypass, and we wash out the blood, and we wash in the cryoprotectant solution that was developed by a cryobiologist. And it's very similar to some of the solutions that go into when hearts and livers, when people do get a heart transplant or a liver transplant, but it goes a bit further, a bit beyond that. So the tissues are vitrified. So you might think if you put a body or human tissues in a freezer that there might be ice crystallization. And with the vitrification process, we minimize that ice crystallization. We can't get rid of all of it currently, but we minimize it and we get rid of most of it so that future technology has less to repair. We put them into liquid nitrogen tanks. They're very much like a giant thermos bottle. There is no electrical, so people often joke about someone unplugging the tank, but no, it's just like a thermos bottle that's filled up with liquid nitrogen. Boil off rates
Mhm.
Take currently 4 or 5 months for all of that liquid nitrogen to boil off, but we don't wait that long. We top them off every week. We check them every day. We've been doing that for 40 plus years without incident.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much how the process works. It's a wait and see what the future will bring. And if people will figure out how to reverse engineer biology so that we can revive and wake people up at a young, youthful age.
Okay, wow. That was a whole, that's like a knowledge bomb on us, Dennis. I guess because one thing we were interested in was, I guess I mentioned a bit earlier, was we don't know a lot of people who are involved in cryonics, but what are the type of people that are interested in cryonics? Like, what kind of people are the ones that are signing up for this sort of procedure?
Definitely people who read a lot about science and are optimistic about the future. We tend to have a lot of people who enjoy science fiction because science fiction kind of touches on, it kind of links the possible and the impossible, kind of that reaching out theory about what might be. And that's the only way we find out what is possible, by kind of reaching into that realm. Um, so you're going to find people who definitely are positive and optimistic. They tend to be, I'm just looking at our demographics of our membership, college educated, um, slightly wealthier. But, that's not to say that we don't have people who um, are less educated or have less money. It's kind of spans across the board. I mean, we have people that are atheist, agnostic, and fundamentalists in all major religions. And if that makes sense, really, when you think about it, because you could get a heart transplant or not get a heart transplant based on your religious or ideological beliefs.
Right.
So it kind of follows along those lines. And in fact, a lot of our detractors and criticism has come from people. It sounds almost like the same things they said when they were picking on people for heart transplants. They were saying that's weird, that's Frankenstein, or you're going against God or nature or something like that. But
Oh,
in the
yeah.
today, we take it for granted that those are great medical technologies, and bottom line, grandma or grandpa is still here, or mom or dad or brother or
Yeah.
sister, and that's all we're trying to do. I mean, it may not work. We can honestly say for sure until we're in the future. So, I guess you could, um, I guess the big thing is will everyone be able to be brought back? And that depends on how quickly we get to the person after cardiac arrest, which is just the same as conventional emergency
Mhm.
medicine.
So ideally, then, like, I'm trying to think, if someone has, let's say, as you said, technically or no, legally dead, as you said earlier, like, what's the ideal amount of time to get to them to start to start CPR and to start putting them in an ice bath and all that?
Immediately after the heart stops beating, immediately.
Mhm.
And in a couple situations, in a couple circumstances, we've been able to do that. But obviously, people don't really have the ability to plan their death, and so not every single cryonics case has gone, that well. It spans all across. It's just like emergency medicine. There's times we get on scene. I worked in emergency medicine as a paramedic in a major city. So there's times, we could bring people back because we got there quickly. And there's other times, it was a futile effort. We tried the best we could, but we couldn't bring them back because too much time had elapsed.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
one thing that I did learn though is, just never know. There's people that you think, oh, it's been too long, and then they're back. And then there's other people you think, um, you know, um, we got there quickly. Everything went absolutely right, and it just was their time. We can't bring them back. So you
Mhm.
just never know. But you give it the college try. You try your best, and you fight the good fight. And that's what we're trying to do: fight the good fight. We care about life and we care about people.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned earlier that it tends to be the wealthier side for a demographic, people choosing to be cryopreserved. So talking about cost specifically, like where's the money going towards? Like cost for chambers, maintenance, like and even transport of the body towards your facilities. Like
Yeah, yeah. So that's a fantastic question. A lot of people assume that we're providing some kind of false hope and just cashing in on the money.
yeah,
But the thing is, um, we are a nonprofit, um, and not only are we a nonprofit, all of our books are open for public scrutiny. So you can see where every penny is spent. A lot of nonprofits don't do that.
yeah,
A lot of our workers are volunteers or work at much lower than normal standard wage. So the money in Cryonics goes to the kind of the equivalent of an endowment fund. It gets invested in index funds, and after that, the interest is what pays for the perpetual upkeep. So, like, we charge 28,000. 28,000 was what we charged in 1974, and that's what we charge today. But most of the money, a small amount goes to the procedure. Most of the money actually goes in that endowment, and the interest is what pays for the taxes, the utilities,
hmm
the salaries, and the liquid nitrogen and so forth. That's what pays for as long as the economy doesn't collapse, the world economy, the way we're invested in everything. As long as the world economy doesn't collapse completely for good, then we should be around and have the money to pay for the constant perpetual upkeep. And most people use life insurance. So if you think about it,
uh
28,000 really not that much.
yeah,
And even for people of poorer means, people who don't have a lot of money, it is affordable. Certainly for people who are uber wealthy, I mean, it's nothing for them.
yeah, make
So it's really one of those, to me, a Pascal's wager. I mean, you got everything to lose, and I mean, everything to gain and nothing to lose.
yeah, no, fair enough.
Okay. I know. Okay. I maybe not everyone knows about this, but earlier you mentioned the terms like technically dead and legally dead, and I guess what do you mean specifically by like terms like technically dead? Like I guess because
Well,
we. Oh, sorry, Dennis. Go ahead.
in cryonics, we often use a term called information theoretic death, and so what that means is when you can't get any information out of the substance. So what do we all have in every cell? We've got DNA. So DNA is enough to, in theory, today, even with today's crude technology, clone you, right? And replace and repair every single part of your body.
Mhm.
But is that really you, or just like a clone or a
Right.
twin? The twin, that's not you. It just looks like you.
Mhm.
Um, the other part of the information is your mind. So there it gets kind of tricky because, well, what is the mind? Well, it's the information that's encoded on that tangled web of nerves and synapses that we haven't quite figured out yet. Your connectome is what a lot of people refer to it as.
Mhm.
Your connectome, which they're learning more and more about as we try to uh, reverse engineer the human brain. But we feel confident that in that biological computer is your mind, and that information is there. We do believe that that information is redundant, and a lot of your memories are, you know, they're backed up in multiple ways, and it's pretty hardy. But we do believe it's not impossible to lose that information eventually. So to use an analogy, if you take a computer and you throw it off the Empire State Building and it shatters in a million pieces, it's not a very functional computer, is it? But
Yeah.
hard drive, that may be broken in pieces, in theory, you could get that information off that hard drive. Or if you took the Mona Lisa and ran it through a shredder, you could, in theory, piece it back together at the molecular level.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know that the Mona Lisa had gone through a shredder. But if you take that same computer and you melt it down, or you know, um, run it through acid bath or something like that and dissolve it. I think that there is no way you can get that information off that hard drive. And so we believe that when a person's buried, eventually, and when they are cremated or whatever, they decompose, the information is lost forever. We believe that eventually, if a body is in warm temperatures long enough, more and more information is lost until there's no information there. But there's plenty of DNA. So, I mean, it's likely you'd still be able to bring a person back with a drop of blood. But
Hmm.
is that the same person? And that's not what we're not shooting for, a cloning mechanism. We're shooting for restoration of your actual mind and who you are, as much of it as possible.
Hmm.
So the sooner
So, unlike a stroke victim, like you think of someone like a stroke victim who might lose a little bit, they're not going to gain back certain things. But
Mhm.
with technology powerful enough to bring you back, we should be able to regenerate tissues, and you should be able to maybe not gain all the information back, but you should be, in theory, be able to gain every bit of function back.
Hmm.
So, certainly a better prognosis than your typical stroke victim.
Absolutely.
So just to confirm, it's I guess when someone is cryopreserved, the sooner you get back to them, the more I guess information is preserved, and that's sort of the I guess, but that's what the goal would
That's
be,
the
right?
gold standard.
Right.
That's
Okay.
absolutely the gold standard. Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Just to confirm. All right. So Sufa, why don't you? What were you gonna ask?
I was gonna talk about like what are we just talked about DNA and blood and that could easily go into genetics. So are there certain conditions or issues that somebody might encounter that could prevent them from undergoing cryopreservation or no longer being a candidate?
Oh well, if you were lost at sea, or if you were maybe in a terrible fire, or I mean, there's a lot of things that could destroy your brain.
Hmm.
Um, or what if you had like a very advanced brain cancer, or brain disease where your body did not biologically die, but by the time it did, your brain was pretty much not there.
Hmm.
And then what are you saving? Just DNA then. So I can think of a whole host of things that could go wrong. But that's just like emergency medicine again. I can think of a million things that'll go wrong. You get caught in traffic on the way to emergency run, and that person's down that much longer. From whatever um, put them in cardiac arrest. So,
Hmm. So, just touching on that topic still, does cryopreservation typically surround the idea of preserving the brain, or do most people tend to focus around the brain and the body?
well, our organization, I mean, there's other organizations that'll do head only or brain only preservation, under the assumption that you can grow the body
Oh.
back. And but our organization only does whole body, um, and I mean, we kind of operate under the premise of do no harm, so we don't see any reason to remove someone's body.
Mm.
The kind of the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. The only gain would be maybe a little bit of storage,
Fair
or
enough.
Right.
money or something. That's, yeah, we don't operate like that ourselves. But certainly, the most important thing is your brain. I mean, even in a conventional sense, if you lost your arm, that's not a good thing, but it's not the same as losing your brain.
Hmm.
What would you rather? You know, when it came right down to it, what would be worse?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if somebody were to undergo severe Alzheimer's or dementia, something that affects their memory and brain, uh,
Mhm.
would they still want to be cryopreserved, or is the hope that after they're cryopreserved, someday in the future, that type of damage would be able to be reversed?
Well, that is entirely up to. I mean, we don't know. That's again, a lot of this hits onto what we don't know, and
Hmm.
so we leave that up to the person who contracts with us. We leave clauses in there where they can say, well, if this happens or that happens, go forward and try at all costs to preserve me. Or if this happens or that happens, I don't want to be preserved.
Mm.
And, take the money that I had earmarked through my life insurance and send it back to my family, or donate it to another scientific cause, or donate it to us, because you still believe in the process, but don't bother saving my tissues for a clone. So we follow the contract and the wishes of the person who contracts with us.
Mhm.
So for people, I guess this is thinking very futuristically, but you said right as of I guess right now, there's no method to bring someone back. But maybe a few hundred years later, there could be some way. Are there any hypothetical ways that could happen?
Well, I mean, there's the book Engines of Creation talked about molecular nanotechnology, which is kind of a micro miniature robotics that would be reverse engineered and designed based off your biological system, right? The repair
Hmm.
systems that exist at the molecular level within your body. So copying nature, because nature had billions of years to perfect what it does through evolution. Copying nature, we'd reverse engineer and maybe have some kind of robots, microscopic robots injected into your system, and they'd cross check your DNA and say, oh yeah, things are supposed to look like this, but they don't look like this. So let's rearrange these molecules in this way or that way until things look the way they're supposed to. And I know that sounds pretty science fiction like, but it's really how biology repairs our tissues now. I mean, look at stem cells. Stem cells are, your body's taking, I mean, we can take today um, some old, uh, you know, differentiated cells out of your skin cells out of your arm, and then reverse time and undifferentiate them back to the stem cell state and use them maybe to repair dead heart tissue
Mhm.
or some other aged tissue in your body, either repair or replace it. And so you get into some kind of hairy philosophical questions of, how much can I replace and is it still me?
Oh yeah,
Well,
Mm.
identity, right?
identity, but you know, then you can say, is it really the components that make up me or the information that make up me? So, I mean, we're constantly eating food and right, shedding skin and bringing in molecules in, molecules out. Um, what really are you? But the information that's encoded on that substrate that is your body.
Mhm.
So I think we're more the information. I mean, or really kind of a combination of both. We're both, but I mean, we can lose a lot of biological matter and replace it as long as we hang on to the identity.
So, we actually jumped over this topic. So, I'm sure euthanasia is a big topic with cryonics because, the whole facets of legally being dead, medically being dead, along the lines of that. So, since it's already a hotly debated topic, what are the benefits of cryothanasia and has it been done before?
Well, uh, it's still not fully accepted in most of the world.
Hmm.
Euthanasia, that is.
Yeah.
But one thing that does seem to be accepted in most of the world is the ability to refuse medical treatment um, when you're in a terminal condition.
Yeah.
So, we're not talking about someone who is depressed and doesn't want to live, but we're talking about someone who may have end stage cancer and they don't want to go through the very end where it's very painful and they feel maybe they're a burden on themselves and society and their families and they're just living in pain.
Hmm.
So you could, forego maybe if you're on a ventilator, you could be removed from the ventilator or forego some sort of a medical treatment, even cancer chemotherapy, for instance, and then speed things up. We have had people who have exercised their legal right to not uh, pursue medical treatment
Hmm.
and sped things up and made for better cryopreservation. And that's their choice, and that's fully legal. And but when it comes to actually assisting someone or allowing them to commit suicide, that's something that I mean we'd have to look at that by case situation.
Hmm.
Was it done in an area where it's legal and ethical and moral. We certainly don't want to ever be involved in anything that encourages people to, commit suicide because they're
Yeah.
Right.
depressed
Right.
or not in a terminal condition, or certainly anything that's illegal in any way. We don't want to be involved with that. So,
Mhm.
and we would turn someone down if they did something illegal or unethical or immoral in
Mhm.
our minds, because we have to preserve the whole organization and movement and all the patients that we have already.
Okay. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing all that, Dennis. And I mean, I guess being involved with Cryonics, like to the extent you are, like you're providing this service for people. I guess it's kind of a personal question, but towards the end of your life, would you also want to undergo cryopreservation yourself?
Absolutely. I'm signed up, my family signed up, and it as a condition of being uh, on the board of directors in Cryonics, the leadership, who, by the way, the whole leadership is democratically elected by our members. So it's member elected by members uh, who ran for the board and then were elected, and then they pick the officers. We all have contracts signed up for Cryonics, so we all have a vested interest. We did that by design. We didn't want someone who didn't have a vested interest in Cryonics running Cryonics.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I believe in it. Do I believe absolutely positively this is going to work? And no, I mean, I think we're very pragmatic, very rational people.
Mhm.
And do we absolutely believe that when you call 911, they're going to save you?
Well, you have to be an
No,
optimist, right?
but if you don't call 911, your chances that
Yeah.
you're going to be right, right. So I wish more people would sign up, because I mean people join up for all kinds of it's, to me irrational stuff, cults and cargo cult type of stuff,
Yeah.
and this is like pretty rational. I mean, pretty Pascal wager type stuff. But it's just maybe because we don't oversell it, and we're brutally honest that hey, this might not work,
Mhm.
but this is the only chance in town, and as far as I'm concerned, even if it doesn't work, it's still a good thing because it's proving what can or can't be done in science. That's the only way we find out what can or can't be done. That's the only way we advance
Yeah.
as a species.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of cryopreservation and requirements for it, say, is there a location requirement? Say I live in Europe. Am I able to still be part of the Cryonics Institute as a member?
Well, yes. In fact, lots of our members are all over the world. The farther away you are from civilization, I guess, the harder it becomes.
Mhm.
But there's kind of, we call them like outposts or standby communities all over the world. So, like for instance, there's an organization called Cryonics UK in England where they don't have a long-term cryogenic facility or cryonic facility, but they have people that will prepare you, and they've got the whole structure set up to prep people and get them ready for shipping through a international funeral director to get to our organization and others. So these people have kind of taken the initiative, and and a lot of people contract through uh, funeral services, their doctors, other organizations that'll do the standby, and it's really interesting
Mhm.
uh, what people have done to uh, get to us. So we kind of like to think of ourselves as the ambulance ride to the future hospital
Ah, okay.
I like that.
that may or may not exist. It is to some degree, where people have to get an ambulance ride to the ambulance ride,
Yeah.
and they've got to prepare, and because they're, but that's just like anything else. I mean, you can learn CPR, and if your loved one goes down, they're going to have a lot better chance than if you just call 911 and watch them gasp for air
Hmm.
Hmm.
than if you do CPR while 911 is coming. Maybe ambulance is caught in traffic or what have you. So, you can do a lot to prepare always when it comes to, your health and your longevity.
Mm.
Okay, Dennis, I know we're keeping you from your family brunch, and I don't want to keep you any further, but we have just one more question, which is, I guess, from everything you've said today, is there one thing you really want people to take away?
Well, I'd like to say that if you're interested in any way in cryonics, there's a ton of information out there. We've got a wonderful website with a magazine that is digital, open to anyone. It's cryonics.org,
Mhm.
and we welcome anyone to do research. And if it's for you, welcome aboard. And even if it's not, you might be very interested in finding out what cryonics is and isn't. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there. So I do encourage people to look into it.
Absolutely. Great. So I think we're at the end of our interview here. So once again, we wanted to thank you, Dennis, for coming on. We enjoyed having you as a guest, and we've definitely learned a lot, and hopefully our audience will as well. Other than that,
Okay, now when are you guys signing up?
Uh,
Abs-
let me check how much I'm making this summer, all right?
Hey, it's this life insurance, which is really cheap when you're young. You get
Oh,
old,
that's
that's
true.
when it
That's true.
goes up, and then they won't even insure you.
Okay, well,
That's
Dennis,
true.
if I sign up,
You
you'll
know,
be the first to
lock in
know.
with
Yeah, you'll be the first to know. You get a wordy email about our signing up.
It's not like I don't get a commission.
Oh, okay. I'll hold you to that. All right. All right. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Dennis.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Take care, gentlemen.
All right.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.